So I want to go ahead and continue off where we finished on the last video with this Tanstack start application. I will say that someone in my community was generous enough to make some refactorings that make our application match kind of like the recommended way of Tanstack start. You can read through this. It's a lot of good information, so I appreciate Sean. Shout out to him. But I'm going to merge it just because I want to, actually code and get some stuff done. All right, so let's push that, and over here, we're gonna go ahead and just pull that. All right, so where are we at? Like, what have we done? Honestly, we haven't done much. I'm gonna go ahead and just go to my dashboard now. And the last thing that we left off on was the ability to add in a new exercise. So when you click on log exercise, that actually takes you to a brand new route of exercise/add, and we have this form where you submit it. We have in client-side validation. Looking great, right? So what we could do next is we need to actually attach the user ID to the data that we're storing in the database. Right now, I think we have it hard-coded. Probably not a good idea. So let's find the add route, which is here, exercise.add, and let's scroll through this a little bit. Some things that I have learned, I will say that I just had a call with Tanner for 2 hours or so, and he gave me all these tips and tricks about using Tanstack start and things I should know about it. I asked him a ton of questions. I don't know if I truly remember all the stuff he told me. It's a lot to take in at once, and we're just going to keep on pretending like we know what we're doing. So first of all, these are posts by default, I believe, so we don't even need to put method of post. And the reason we're doing this is because the browser is not going to cache the response, and it has it's an easier interface behind the scenes when it does a post payload, versus if you switch it to a method get, it's going to use query strings, and you could potentially have your browser cache these things, because these server functions, they're just going to do a request to your backend, right? And so the browser has a caching mechanism built in, and you don't want to forget about that. Anyway, so let's find where we are actually creating this. So I have this create exercise use case, and if you look at this, we are creating an exercise and we hard-coded the user ID to 1. This is not good. What we should do instead is probably pass in the user ID here. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a generic type called context. Use case context maybe. And this could just take in a user ID as a number, I think is what we are using right now. And I'm going to go ahead and just do some form of I guess you could call this function injection. I want to go ahead and say context here. And what I'm doing this for is that later on in our application, we might have different things that we want to put onto this context object as we pass it into functions. So we want to first of all check if the user ID is defined, and we could probably actually also make this potentially undefined as well. And we'll know that we are not authenticated. All right, so now that we have the context, let's just switch this to context.userid, okay? And we need to figure out how do we actually check to make sure that we have an authenticator request. Because right now, the thing that's calling this, it needs to pass in a user ID, right? We got to get that user ID somehow. So first, let's get the session. I think we could potentially just run this. There's a validate request method that I have, and this is going to basically get the session from the cookie, validate it, and if it's good, we get back an actual session in a user, okay? And I don't think this throws errors, or the things that it calls throws errors, so we should be good. So anyway, this should have the user object on it, and then we can actually pass in the user as context over here, right? Now we also want to check that if the user is not defined, we should probably just throw an error here inside the validator, and then the UI can probably gracefully handle that error if we want to. But let's try this out now. So now if I go back to the UI, and I tried to actually just submit some information here. Let's do this. Testing, go ahead and click submit. I want to make sure that in my database, if I go to exercises and refresh, the user ID is set correctly, and it is. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete those and try it one more time. Just to make sure, it doesn't hurt to just verify your code multiple times before you ship it, and your product owner is like, hey, your code doesn't work, and then you have to go and waste a bunch of time fixing it all, right? So it looks like it did get the user ID, and if I go to users, we should have that user with an ID of 1 with my email. Let's try to bring in a card component or make this look a little bit better. So we can go to ShadCN, and I'll type in card and see if I can find a card component. And here's a nice looking card. I mean, we just go ahead and look at the examples. I don't think I've installed this yet, so let's copy this, go over to our terminal, and run it. And that should install it and bring in the component that we will need. If we were to scroll back a little bit more, it's going to show us how to use this. Let's bring in the card here. And this is the exercises pages that we're going to have to modify, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just paste in, what am I looking for? Exercise.index, I think. So we'll have to go ahead and just modify this one. Right now we have like a placeholder, just like a div that displays all this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and make a function here called function exercise card. And then we are going to return the card in a second. But I do want to first import all this stuff from shadcn, just like that. And then go back to the example. We have all this code that we just grab over. And we should be good now. So now we want to use it. Down here, we could potentially just do this. And then we want to pass in the entire exercise object here. So I'm going to go ahead and just pass it in as a prop. Delete this. We'll probably add a key still. So I'm going to go ahead and just add that key in. And then up at the card itself, we want to add in the exercise. So I'm going to go ahead and import that type from my drizzle schema. And then just click tab a couple times and let AI do the job for you, because we are all lazy, right? Who knows what all this stuff is? Rated at. Let's just comment that out for right now. Let's go back to the UI and refresh, and here's our card. Here's what it looks like. Not too bad, right? Not too shabby. So let's go ahead and put some gap between the title and the actual cards. Find out where that's being used. All right, it's being used over here. This div is the entire like title component. And so technically what we could do is, I think on here we could say flex column, gap of 4, and then that looks a little bit better. I might even give it a gap of 8. Okay, here we go. Looking pretty good, right? This isn't the best looking card, but honestly, the way I like the code is I like to build out the skeleton, and then later on you can come back and make it look a little bit nicer. So let's add some more functionality to this to allow a user to delete the exercise. And I think we could just have like a button up here, like a trash can icon or something, that someone can click, and then it maybe could give like a delete dialog to delete this card, right? So let's first try to get a button up here. How do you get a button up at the top right of this exercise? Well, we should probably go to the card header, and we have the title and the description here. Description. So I think what we could do is probably in the title itself, I wonder if we could actually put a button. Sometimes with like shadcn stuff breaks. So you just kind of play around with it. Okay, a button did show up in the title, which is good. So what we could do in the title itself is we could just give it a flex and a justify between, and now the button is pushed over to the right. It's a little big, but it's fine, because on the button itself, I believe we can say icon, and we can make this something, actually I think it's called size. We could do icon. And then here on the button itself, we could put an icon in here called trash icon. Okay, let's go back, and this is what it looks like. Nice little button. You can click it. Right now it doesn't do anything when you click it. So let's add in that functionality. So how do you do something when a user clicks a button? Well, you could say on click, and then you got to do something, right? What do we want to do? We want to call it back an endpoint to actually delete the card ID, or the exercise ID. Okay, so stick with me. What we're going to do here is just make a function. I'm going to say const delete exercise function. It's going to call an exercise use case. Okay. Now instead of hard coding this a string, I'm actually say exercise of ID, so it actually knows the proper type of this. And then let's see, parameter exercises in context are incompatible. I'm not sure what is going on there. I think potentially I could first do a validator, and then we could go ahead and just do that. And then I think, I'll get rid of that like little type thing. I think this is probably a better approach. Go ahead and make sure this is good. Hover over it. It looks like it is proper. And then let's make this use case. Let me import this. Let's make this use case over here. So let's go back to this use case. I'm going to say export function delete exercise use case. And then we're going to call a data access method. Export function, delete that one. And then just call whatever method this is. I think this is how you do it in Drizzle. And we should be good now. So let's just import this. All right, let's import this one. And then we'll keep going up the chain, importing all this stuff. Does this need to have data? I think this needs to be data.exercise ID. Maybe. What is this complaining about? String is not assignable to type number. Okay, this actually needs to be a number. There we go. Okay, so we have this Tanstack function that we can use to delete the exercise from the database. Now we just need to call it. So how do you call it? You go down here and you just basically invoke it, right? And then the actual ID that we need to pass in, that is going to come from this exercise object here. And we should be able to click on this and it should basically delete it from our database. But I think we're going to have to tell the UI that it needs to like refetch all the exercises. All right, let's first verify that I can delete this thing. By the way, you can do a variant destructive to make it red. Okay, so if I click it and refresh manually, it's gone. So it did get deleted from the database, but there's a couple of things we want to do first of all. First of all, we want to make sure that this is doing authentication. So we could do something similar like we did on the other page when we added one, which is we make sure that the user is actually validated. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy some code. And we definitely want to make sure that if the user ID, I'll just go ahead and pass in the user ID like this. And then we'll go to this function. We're gonna go ahead and just use that same context for all of our functions. So we have like this nice way to know what it needs. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm actually just gonna say user ID. But we're just gonna keep this super simple. Okay, let's just import that schema. And then I'm gonna undo what I was doing because I change my mind all the time when I'm coding. Okay, we're gonna pass in that user ID and we're gonna add this in. And then we can actually check. First, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that we can only delete the exercise that we own. So you could do this in the persistence method, I guess, if you wanted to be like more efficient. I think this is like a business thing. So technically, I might just get the exercise first, like this. I think we have like a get exercise method. Oh, we don't have a get exercise. Let's go here and we're going to make one. Have get exercises. So I want to get the exercise by ID here. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a method called get exercise. It's going to find the first one that matches this ID. And then we can go back and use it. So we'll go ahead and just call it. And we will just bring it in. Make sure this is async. Awesome. So why am I doing this? Why am I fetching the exercise first? It's because I want to do some type of authorization checks. And this is my business logic. So I'm going to do the check inside my business use case. And if the exercise does not belong to me, I want to throw some type of authentication error. For right now, I'll just go ahead and say like unauthorized. But I mean, technically you could bring in some better type of error handling. And then also exercise. Yeah, if there is no exercise, probably throw in another error like this. If the user ID is not equal to the one that the user is currently authenticated with. I might rename this one to authenticated user ID. I'm very verbose when it comes to my naming of variables just because it's easier to read, right? I've seen people write like 2-letter variable names and it's like, bro, like how are other engineers going to come and read this code when it's just a bunch of letters? Like, let's actually be descriptive of what we're doing. But anyway, so this is going to get the current exercise, verify it exists, and it's going to verify you're authorized to do it, and then it's going to actually delete it from the database, okay? Let's go back to this method where we called it. And one thing I'll point out is that Tanstack Router has like middlewares built into it. So what we could do is try to understand how middlewares work, because I don't know how they work. So let's go to middlewares. And hopefully there's something here. Do I need to go to Tanstack start or something? I don't really know. Server functions. Let's see if there's a middleware. Okay, the next section is the middleware. So let's look at this. You can call it create middleware like this, .server, async next data. Let's just copy this whole thing. And for right now, I'm going to put it in this file. and then I can refactor later. Like I like moving faster, and then I'll come back and change up code. But I'm gonna go ahead and call this authenticated middleware. Okay, and then what we want to do is we're gonna do this logic here. I'm gonna cut it out, and then we're gonna put that right here. And I think if I'm reading this correctly, I should probably read the docs, honestly. If you don't call next, it probably won't go to the next section. I'm kind of curious what the server thing is doing. Like what is defining middlewares for server functions? Okay, you could do .server. Yeah, I guess what we could do, honestly, is just like return this. And then I could just pass in user. Probably like this. How do you type this stuff? Next in data. Request received is data. Wait next. The response process result. Return the result. Sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, but I think what I could do is down here, we could do a middleware. We can just do the authenticated middleware here. And then somehow we should get access to the context. I'm guessing context would have the user. So I could say context user ID. And then this could potentially be undefined, I think. I don't get this. I honestly do not get this. Create middleware, a validator, Zod schema. Returning the request result from next. The next function is used to execute the next middleware in the chain. You must await and return or return directly the result of next function provided to you for the chain to continue executing. Oh, you can pass it here. Okay. Yeah, I would say that this should be like one of the first things that's in the docs. Like this probably the most important things. That's the whole reason why you use middleware, right? So I think you actually just pass context here, and I could say user ID like this. And then this could potentially be undefined if I just got rid of the if statement here. So let's do this, and then let's see what this is going to be set to. Number or undefined. And so I guess my question is, do I want to throw an error, or do I want to just let this happen? Kind of feel like throwing an error might be better. Okay, so now the type safety is good. You see that? It says context user ID. By the way, I'm kind of tired making this video. Like 12 o'clock right now. I just wanted to make a video. But what was I doing? Yeah, I think I can get rid of this stuff. The point is, what we just did that for is we have a middleware function that verifies the cookies, makes sure we're good, and then it gets the user, throws an error if it's not set, and then we call next. This is going to allow it to go on to the next section of our server function. And yeah, I think that should be it. And now like we know that this thing will never run unless the user ID was provided. Okay, and so I think what I could do is go back to my app, and then we're going to add an exercise real quick. I really should default these as something else, but let's submit it, make sure we can delete it, and refresh, and it's gone. Okay, cool. So we got authorization working for deleting, but I think what would be good is like we should refresh the page when we actually delete the card. I don't know how to do that. Because right now the data for this page is coming from the loader, but I don't know how to trigger the route to refetch the data. Router.invalidate, I think that's probably what we call. Maybe I'll try that. So like in the exercise card itself, we're going to bring in the router. And I'll say, I need to do that then. Router.invalidate. Is that the right way to do it? Correct me in the comments if this is not the way you're supposed to do it. But the idea is I think that's going to trigger the loader to grab the new information. I don't know. We'll find out. Let's just go ahead and refresh. I'm going to click it, and it went away. Okay. So there's probably some more stuff I should read about, like how do I optimistically delete that and then let the request happen on the back end. But that's a good start. I'm sure there's different ways you can structure this to not have to call router.invalidate. I guess this is fine. Whatever. Yeah, to be honest, I don't know if I have energy to do anything else. I'm so tired. Like, I'm just tired. I'm going to go ahead and commit this. I don't feel like we did much in this video, but I'm just trying to make content daily of me building stuff, and you can see me code live. and maybe learn something from watching me code live. If you guys find this stuff useful, let me know. If you don't, let me know, and I'll put it under consideration to not do it. All right, let's just go through here. I'm just going to commit everything. I'm going to say like adding the ability to delete in exercise. All right, before I wrap up, just a reminder, before you end your learning session for the day, ask yourself, what did I learn today? Because you should be able to at least list one thing, or maybe 4 things, 10 things if you're super smart. What's one thing that you learned from watching this video? What's one thing that I learned making this video for you all? I learned about middlewares. Okay, I had never used middleware in Tanstack Start. Super easy to use. It kind of reminds me of a TRPC middleware or something like that, where you just call a method. You can denote if it's going to be a server middleware. You do some things, and then you call next, which allows you to pass some context. Okay, that context can be automatically passed to your handler. Notice that if you just hover over context now, it knows that there's a user ID that should come over. And so this allows me to create server functions that automatically verify that the user is authenticated. And I know that this will never get called unless they have a correct session. Okay, so that's pretty good. That's a pretty good thing to, add on that checklist of things that I've learned. Some other stuff I learned is invalidating this stuff, right? So when you use the loader on your route, sometimes you want to tell Tanstack to hey, you need to refresh and give me some new data. Turns out that you just pull in this router equals use router hook, and you call router.invalidate down here. As simple as that. Now, I guess technically I could make this an async function and just do that. That might be a little bit cleaner to do the same thing. And I think that's about all we learned. I think there's one place I would like to go back and refactor the code. Here, we should probably use a middleware, right? So let's bring in that middleware, and let's go ahead and bring in the authenticated middleware. Now, I didn't export this. So I feel like this should probably be exported, and then we should probably move it to a different file because it seems like it's a pretty helpful utility that we could use. So I'm going to go ahead and just say lib. Maybe it should be a lib. I don't know. Let's just go put it here. I'll say auth, and I'll go ahead and paste this. Go ahead and import whatever things we might need. I think that's it. So now that we have those things imported, I can just go ahead and import that one. And then also, we'll import it here. Right? And we could also, get rid of this stuff. We don't need this stuff. We could bring in context, and then we could probably use the context dot user ID or something. In fact, I'm going to do that. Context user ID. I'm going to go here. I'm going to refactor this to user ID. I thought I was going to do something cool with the whole user ID thing, but I decided that maybe not. Just get rid of that for now. Okay, there. So I made some refactorings. If I was a good engineer, I'd go and verify that those refactorings didn't break anything. If you're a really good engineer, you have automated tests that run and verify that the stuff you just changed didn't break your code. But we're mediocre in this channel, so let's just go ahead and say using middleware on add exercises. Go ahead and commit this. Anyway, I hope you guys had some fun watching me. Be sure to go check out the code if you just want to get a better understanding how Tanstack Start kind of works as you're watching me build this out live. And let me know if there's anything that I did wrong or you think I can improve on using Tanstack Start. I'm still trying to understand how the routing works and all the other things work, but I'll get there. All right, have a good day. Happy coding.